No, when we're live. Awesome. I think we're live, buddy. All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for checking us out. This is another edition of, I guess I need to come up with an actual name for this series. We've just mainly been talking about how the recent international pandemic has impacted a wide variety of industries and businesses. Today, I've got a good buddy of mine, Mr. Austin Church. Austin, how are you doing today, buddy?
I cannot complain. I'm glad to be here with you.
Good. Glad to have you, man. And so, Austin is in the industry of helping startups and businesses that have been around a while who need
hmm
help from a branding perspective. So, not just startups, but anybody who's looking to refresh their branding and understand how they can stand apart in a world of noise. There's a lot of that out there, and so we want to kind of break this down into two parts. Number one, what can companies do right now as business has changed so much and as we are living in a virtual world so often right now. But we also want to talk about things that people can do just in general. How can you
hmm
make sure that your brand stands out? And so that's what we're going to get into in just a second. We were talking before we were talking before we started recording about when we first met, and we determined that it was at a mastermind group through a mutual friend at least 3 years ago, right?
It's been a little while, and it actually took us a little while to figure out how we had met because once we had met, it was like I saw you every couple of days, and you kind of laugh because you're like, how did it take us even that long to meet? Because we know 99% of the same people, it
Yeah,
seems like.
yeah.
So once Kenneth was in my life, I was like, I couldn't remember a time when he wasn't in my life.
Either I can't get rid of you or you can't get rid
I
of
know,
me.
that's right. That's right. Get out of here. Well, you
Yeah,
keep following me around, man.
but either way, we
Yeah,
love and enjoyed it, man. So
that's right.
very very quickly, tell us a little bit about your background and your company and what you do for
hmm
business.
So I got my entree into the business world through a marketing agency, and then I got into iOS apps, and then I co-founded a tech startup for independent musicians. And I think that's probably when I really started focusing on branding as a discipline. And so these days I run a brand consulting firm called Balernum, and we work with a lot of startups, if only because I know the language and I know a lot of the challenges that founders face. And I know some of the pitfalls too. And having been through it myself, I think I have a little bit more credibility with founders. I'm not just the talking head coming in. I can say, yeah, like when we raised money, here's what it felt like, and here's how that went, and so on and so forth. So we're really keen on coming alongside founders on the journey and getting in the trenches with them and getting our fingernails dirty.
Yeah.
So that's the very quick backstory.
Well, this is such an interesting time to be startup co-founder or founder,
hmm
mainly because there's so much uncertainty. And when you start a business, there's already a high level of uncertainty, and we've just increased that over the last 4 to 6 weeks here across the
Oh
world.
man, yeah.
Give us the pulse of the startup community right now in terms of the outlook and kind of where startup founders are and kind of what they see is going on right now and in the future of the coming months, particularly.
So I think you put it well. I mean, the future is always uncertain, and uh, starting a business, launching a startup is always difficult. And with the uncertainty and the extra dimension of the pandemic and economic downturn, I think the uncertainty and the difficulty are so hard and close. Um, we just have to grapple with them head on in a way that um, might be, is definitely unusual. But I think it can also be clarifying in the sense that when there is so little that you cannot control, as a startup founder, you have to focus on what you can control. And when it comes to like customer acquisition, serve the person right in front of you. I mean, one of the mistakes I think we made was thinking about scale before we had even achieved critical mass. And it's really easy to be so busy thinking about how to get your revenues to this point over here that you neglect that customer who's right in front of you and who could eventually help you get there, if you take care of this customer right in front of you. And so I think the startups that are going to weather this storm are going to be the ones that roll up their sleeves and commit to serving the customers right in front of them. And I'll give you an example. There is a platform I use called Podia, Podia.
Okay.
I use it for my online course. And I got an email from them today saying they basically threw their product roadmap out the window so that they could add webinars as one of the product options that their online creators now have access to as a part of their platform. And they did it because they've been listening to all of their customers, right? And so I think now more than ever is the time to listen to your customers, right? Now, you always have to live in that tension of what is your business roadmap? What's your product roadmap? If you're a tech startup, adding more features or more functionality represents a very real cost in terms of development. And there's always a trade-off. If we listen to our customers over here and add this feature, is that going to be the most valuable feature to everyone down the road, right? But that's the first thing, is listen to your customers, serve the person right in front of you. And I'm obviously biased as a brand consultant, but I think really focusing on brand right now is a smart move.
Yeah, brand and marketing and advertising and promotions, all those things kind of go together, and you're the expert, so I won't try to put my own spin on what each one means. But typically, studies have shown that companies who invest in marketing, that invest in their brand during economic downturns, tend to do better.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you kind of tell us, and you touched on a little bit when you talked about focusing on your customer and their needs and their wants. Can you tell us why that is?
So I think a downturn amplifies what is always happening, which is there are winners and losers.
Mm-hmm.
People will still spend money. They may spend a little bit less money, but in my industry and in yours, people still have needs. There will still be deals done. And so when it comes to, well, who is getting that customer, if the pool of opportunities shrinks to some degree, why do people make the choices that they do to go with this startup or that startup, to go with this IT and managed business services firm or that one? And a lot of it comes down to awareness. Have they heard of you, right? A lot of it comes down to your value proposition. Is there anything differentiating you from the 12 competitors that you have?
Mm-hmm.
That's where brand becomes so important, right? Because if the only basis on which you have to compete is price, well, in an economic downturn, if everybody, they're slashing their prices, maybe someone undercuts you, right? Or if doing business with you always meant more than just getting a low price, because people really buy into a transcendent purpose that you have. They feel like by doing business with you, they're actually doing some good in the world. And I mean, we could run through a really long list of brands that do that transcendent purpose thing really well, right? Patagonia is one that comes up a lot. But people are still going to spend money, businesses and individuals. And a lot of it comes down to awareness. That's where marketing comes in. If people do not know about you, they cannot send money your way.
Yeah.
I cannot be more like plain spoken than that,
Yeah.
right? So marketing at its most basic is just giving people a chance to care. They
Yeah.
cannot care about you if they do not know about you. And then let's say once you've got their attention, what story are you going to tell them, right? A lot of startups, they make the mistake of focusing on the functional benefits of their product. Here are the things that we can do for you. Now that's great. It's like, okay, cool. You have a software tool that can, send ACH payments, right? That's great. I'd like to be able to receive seamlessly ACH payments from my clients. That's great. Now, what is the emotional end benefit of that tool? Well, man, if things are crazy financially right now, the last thing you want to happen is a check get lost in the mail.
Yeah.
And you certainly need every penny right now. So losing 3% to credit card processing fees, that's frustrating. And let's be honest, with all of the other options we have these days, it doesn't make sense to pay that much for the convenience of credit card processing. So with us, you can get, seamless ACH payments for $3 a pop. And if you're accepting really large payments, well, $3 is nothing, right? So that's the emotional and benefit, is getting into the frustration of the existing solutions, right? Well, this is all fresh in my mind because some college buddies of mine just started a company, and this is what they do, right? And I think they're making a lot of the right moves. But when people are spending less money and they have just as many options, they're going to end up going with the companies that have the strongest positioning, that have the most attractive value proposition, that tell a great story, and that is brand.
Yeah. Your brand is so important. It's who you are personally and as an organization. Getting into, you mentioned webinars during our talk right now, and even before we began the recording, you were saying you were talking about a webinar, and you actually shared a sentiment that myself and I think many other people feel. It's like, oh my gosh, it's a webinar. You know what I mean?
Yet another webinar.
Yeah, another webinar. I have to go through another webinar. I'm gonna shoot myself.
That's right.
But right now, virtually everything that we're doing is virtual. Right?
literally virtually, right?
So it's been interesting. I've shared some thoughts about this with a couple of other guests that have been on the show, and people are discussing, what the world will look like moving forward. But you were talking about the success that your webinar had in terms of people literally and figuratively buying into what it was you were selling via the webinar.
Right.
How do you think, and it doesn't have to be all about webinars, but how do you think your business or your industry is going to change when you look at where it was in, we'll say, the summer of 2019 versus where it will be in the summer of 2021 or 2022? What do you think are going to be some of the very noticeable changes that people will be able to see in terms of how organizations, even more particularly startups, go about branding themselves and creating that buzz around their product or service?
I think that's a really good question. I have put some time into thinking about it. I think there are brick and mortar businesses that are hyper local that will have to move online in earnest for the first time ever. And they will experience some of the pangs, some of the difficulties that direct to consumer brands experienced 20, 25 years ago, right? In terms of differentiation. So you're a gray sneaker company and you decide you want to sell gray sneakers online. Well, you realized online people have a bajillion choices. So you have to figure out ways to stand out. You have to offer something more than just this commoditized product, right? Well, if you're a hyper local business and you're always able to depend to some degree on foot traffic, on getting business locally, and then this pandemic happens, and it's strange to be in the middle of this paradigm shift before it has fully finished. Well, a lot of these local companies, in order to survive, are going to need to get clients online. And it's going to be really challenging for them. I'll give you an example. You're a local CPA firm, and you pretty much always have gotten your business locally. Maybe you were a member of the chamber. Maybe you went to events. Maybe you did a sponsorship for like a local little league team. Maybe you did a lunch and learn for financial planners, and that was the way you were able to pick up some of their clients and make them your own, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if more and more business and more sales meetings are happening on Zoom, Microsoft meetings, right? Whatever. Well, if you're courting or going after, let's say, a commercial painting company, and then there's this CPA firm in Florida or Nebraska or in California that is like, oh, we actually specialize in helping commercial painting companies get their books in shape, get their chart of accounts in order, do some projecting. We help them with financial consulting. We help them set up their benefits packages, whatever. If there is another already virtual company offering a suite of services or like a customized productized service that is much more tailored for specific industries, if they've niched down, well, then just being the local option is not going to be a very enticing offer. So you ask me, what are things looking like in branding and marketing? How are things shifting? There are going to be all these local businesses that are going to actually have to have a real value proposition for the first time ever. Because just saying to a commercial painting company, we can do your tax prep, and if we meet quarterly, well, we can help you with some projections and maybe like tell you when it is or is not a good idea to hire a second crew, right? Again, if there's another firm that is niched down, you can't compete. So if you're meeting with prospects who are across town, but you're meeting on Zoom or you're meeting on meetings, that prospect, it's not very different for them to meet with you across town virtually versus meeting with someone across the country virtually. So a lot more businesses are going to need to learn new forms of marketing that aren't dependent upon local stuff for the first time ever. Now, things have been moving that way, right?
Yeah.
Oh, like you have all these services companies that are like, maybe it's time to specialize. Maybe it's time to pick a niche, whatever. But I think this is going to hasten that. Like that paradigm shift has now accelerated.
Yeah. This is
and then
the Band-Aid.
Say it again.
This is rip the Band-Aid off.
That's right. You can't sort of have the crutch of local marketing events anymore. You're going to have to become really, really good at online lead generation. And some local companies will take to that really well, and they're going to be like, why didn't I start this sooner? You're telling me there are hundreds of thousands of companies out there who need what we do, and now we're learning how to actually get in front of them? Amazing, right? They're going to be like, hey, did you know that you can do prospecting on LinkedIn? And everyone else is going to be like, yeah, I've been doing that for years.
Yeah.
Where have you been? Right. But anyway, and then I'm so brand first, it's ridiculous, but a lot of companies are going to realize we don't have an authentic brand. And that's the one thing that's not going to change, is authenticity will still be the single most attractive thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Does that help? I know I was all over the place, but
heads up, and I can certainly see, like you said, it's been going that way, but this is going to really accelerate that. So
yeah,
as we wrap up here, man, we talked a little bit about the webinars and some of the trainings that you do. If there are people out there right now that are wondering how they can learn how to enhance their brand and hear more from you through a webinar or training, what steps do they need to take in order to make that happen?
So if they go to our homepage, Balernum, BALERNUM.com, Balernum.com, we have a one-of-a-kind brand scorecard. It's a lot of fun to use. You can print it out. For those of you out there who still print things, right? But print it out. And if you work through the questions, it will help you very quickly identify your brand's strengths, weaknesses, and best opportunities. So that's
one more time.
Balernum, BALERNUM.com. Awesome. And then people can find me on Twitter, Austin L as in Larry, Austin L Church. And I'm all sorts of other places, but I'll limit myself to 2. How about that?
Awesome. Well, brother, we appreciate you today coming in and sitting down and speaking with us, or at least maybe not coming in. Maybe I should say logging on. Right?
That's right. Digital hugs. Digital hugs.
And dropping some knowledge. So thank you so very much. And we appreciate your time. And I look forward to the day that we can give each other a real hug again, brother.
I look forward to that very much. It was a pleasure to be here. Awesome. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Thanks a lot, buddy.
See ya.
Bye-bye.